IELTS Essay Introductions for Band 9. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to write an effective introduction for your IELTS essay. If you want to see how to write the whole essay, I have another video and I'll put the link in the description to that. Essentially, we have three types of essays that we need to write in an IELTS test. I'm going to be showing you how to write the introduction for each of these types of tasks. Now, first of all, we have our opinion essays. Words such as what is your opinion, do you agree or disagree, and so on. Then we've got our both sides an opinion essay, where you're asked to describe two sides of an argument and then give your own opinion at the end. And then finally we move on to the two question essays. These are often problem and solutions, but there can be other types of questions as well, such as your opinion on a possible solution, and then to make some recommendations about other potential solutions. So now let's move on and see how we write the introduction for these three types of essays. Now, sometimes students want to have just one way for all essays. This doesn't really work, and you need to have at least two different ways to write your introductions, which I'll be showing you, and then possibly even a third if you're trying to get to 7 and beyond. For all these essays, though, we really only need two sentences. We need to have a general statement, and this paraphrases the topic that you're given, and then after this we need to have a specific statement which responds to the questions that you're asked in the task instructions. I want you to keep these two sentences in mind as we look at each type of essay, and you'll see that for each type of essay there's two parts to the introduction. There's the rephrasing of the topic and then some sort of response to the questions that are asked. So with the opinion essay, you're going to rephrase the topic that you're given. So that's the general statement. And then the specific statement, you're going to have a sentence which states your position, which states how much you agree or disagree, or gives some sort of response to the question words of the task. So let's say this is the task instructions here. First of all, we've got our topic. Computers are being used more and more in education, and some say will soon be no role for the teacher in education. So we're going to be paraphrasing this in our first sentence of our introduction. Then we need to respond to the question words. This is an opinion essay. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Extent here means how much. How much do you agree or disagree? We must respond to this when we write our introduction. Let's start off by looking at an effective paraphrase of this topic above. What we're doing when we're paraphrasing is that we're trying to change some of the given words. So for instance, computers here I have paraphrased to computing technology. Okay, as a way to paraphrase that. No role for, I've paraphrased this to replace. Okay, and the other thing that we sometimes do is just move words around in the sentence. So the topic starts with the word computers. I've got computers paraphrased and occurring in the middle of the sentence. So those are the two main ways to paraphrase: changing words or the form of words. So we've got computers changed to computing, and then possibly changing words around in the sentence, which is effectively changing the grammar structure of the sentence. Okay, so what we've got: some people believe computing technology may be used to replace teachers in the future. So, and notice how this is quite a short introduction. We don't need a lot of words in order to do this. And then I give an example here of a bad rephrase or a bad paraphrase. And the problem here with this paraphrase is that I've slightly changed the topic. So the bad rephrase: due to the rising prevalence of advanced technology, computers are becoming more useful. And then the problem is here with this more useful. Computers becoming more useful. That's not really what the topic is about. The topic is not about computers becoming more useful. It's about whether there is a role for the teacher, whether teachers will be rephrased. So this is a common mistake, to poorly paraphrase the topic. And in essence, this changes the topic and makes it difficult for you to score well for task response, because you're effectively changing the topic. If this were to persist throughout the whole essay, you're going to come down to a 5 or possibly 4 for your task response. And then the other thing that I often see is too long a rephrase. A lot of teachers are saying you should have some sort of background statement. I don't agree with this. I think it just makes the topic less clear to the reader, to the examiner, and it makes your essay unnecessarily long, which puts pressure on you to complete it. So that's why I favour a short, simple introduction. Finally, also, even if you did have time to write a big, long, huge introduction, the time and words would be better spent on the body of the essay, where you're trying to develop your main ideas. So I prefer and I favour a short introduction that just quickly and clearly tells the examiner that you understood the topic and you've understood the questions that have been asked. So let's have a look at an example of a big, huge, long, unnecessarily long introduction. So we've got, ever since the dawn of time, mankind has been finding ways to improve their lives. More recently, education has emerged as a very important aspect of human lives. Therefore, it is worthwhile to consider whether technology offers any advantages in the classroom and whether they are more useful, whether it is more useful than the people who have trained for many years as academic experts. So a lot of people might like this introduction, and when I say people, I mean candidates, not examiners. Some candidates may think, wow, this is a great introduction because there's high-level language in it, and wow, it's long or something. The trouble is, it's quite difficult to understand. If you hadn't seen the task instructions, you'd struggle a bit to know what they were. And I always think that if you write your introduction well, the examiner or the reader could guess what the topic is, what the questions are, even without seeing the task instructions. So this, for me, is an ineffective introduction because it does not clearly introduce the topic or the questions, what the essay is about. And then we move on to the specific statement for this essay. If you remember, the question was, to what extent do you agree or disagree? And then this is your opinion, so it's up to you what you choose. Sometimes people are asking me, do I have to cover both sides of the argument? No, that's a different question. That's the question that asks you to discuss both sides and give your opinion. This one is only asking for your opinion, okay? So with a question like this, you definitely need to clearly state whether you agree or disagree, and then you should say how much. Just saying you agree or you disagree is not enough. So here are some options that you can use, that you can choose for your test. So the first option is to just totally agree. In this case, the essay will only be why you agree. There won't be any disagreeing aspects. If you agree but you want to have a concession or some aspect that you disagree on, then you can choose this. You can say that you somewhat agree, and this means most of the essay is going to be about agreeing, but you think there's some instance or special circumstance where you disagree, where you perhaps think that teachers could be replaced, like for instance in remote communities or something like that. Some candidates like to equally agree and disagree. I really don't favour this approach. For me, I think the hardest argument to make is that you equally agree and disagree about something, that kind of the positives and negatives are exactly precisely equal. It's an extremely difficult argument to make, and the other problem is that it often comes out a little bit unconvincing. Alright then, and you might somewhat disagree, which means that you have the sort of main thrust of the essay about disagreeing, but then there's some aspect or situation where you agree. So you might think that teachers can be replaced by technology. However, there might be some situation where they can't, for instance with young children who still need to be supervised and monitored. And then you could totally disagree. You could argue about the value of teachers and why they're needed and why teachers can never be replaced by computers. In this case, the whole essay would be about disagreeing. Maybe you'd have two reasons. One, the sort of value of teachers as motivators and maybe monitors in the case of children. And then perhaps another point about how teachers can customize things to learners' needs, how they can find the individual differences in their classroom or the specific characteristics of their class that computers can't do. Computers are very good at teaching in standardized situations, but perhaps not when students' needs differ. So you could argue that teachers will never disappear and they'll always be needed. And then let's see what some of these sentences would actually look like. So if you totally agreed, you could say, I totally agree with this opinion. And then, even better, you could give some of the reasons for it. We've got that here. I totally agree that teachers should be replaced with computers because they are cheaper and more convenient for students. Okay, so the cost advantage and the convenience, study anywhere, anytime. And then with this total agreeing, we can imagine there'll be two body paragraphs for the essay. One about how computers are cheaper, the fees will be lower, and then another one about the convenience, studying anywhere, anytime. This is very nice. It's a very easy structure to follow, and on the whole, I suggest you totally agree or totally disagree, unless you're trying to get a very high score of maybe 8 or 9, where a concession is quite handy just to show a bit of sophistication to the examiner, or in the situation you just can't come up with 2 reasons for totally agreeing or 2 reasons for totally disagreeing. But I think this is the safest option, and if you're only going for 7 or below, just totally agree or totally disagree. It'll avoid a host of problems that occur when people are writing these introductions and also essays. So essentially any question that's asking for your opinion can be responded to in 2 sentences. Rephrase the topic and then give your position. State whether you agree or disagree and the extent how much, or if it's a question, perhaps do you think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? Then you might write something a bit different here for your position. You might say, I believe the merits outweigh the drawbacks, or something like that here. Then for all other essays that are not asking for your opinion, you can use this structure. You can rephrase the topic, just as we saw with the opinion essays, and then you can use this sentence here. This essay discusses, and then a rephrase of the question. You'll see that rephrasing or paraphrasing is really, really important. It's a really important skill for your writing test. Also the speaking test, it's good to paraphrase questions that the examiner gives you. And then in the reading and listening test, often the way you're tested is you're given a certain phrase in the text, the article of the reading or the listening text, and then the answer requires you to pick an answer that is a paraphrase of that text. So rephrasing, paraphrasing is a really, really important skill for IELTS that you should work on. Let's change our task instructions for a non-opinion type of essay. So topic very similar. Computers are being used more and more in education. And then now a non-opinion question. And actually it's a 2-question essay, so we've got 2 questions. What are some disadvantages of using computers in the classroom? What are some ways to overcome these disadvantages? In other words, what are the solutions? So this is sort of like a problem solution essay. The problems are the disadvantages, and then the overcoming is the solutions. So let's see how we can respond to this task instructions. So let's see how we can respond to these task instructions using this phrase. We can paraphrase the topic to something like this: computer technology is being used increasingly, and then our specific statement. This essay discusses drawbacks with the use of computers in schools and also some ways to overcome them. Okay, so the drawbacks is the paraphrase of disadvantages and ways to overcome them. Let's change that. And so we rephrase that to solve them. So this essay discusses drawbacks with the use of computers in schools and also some ways to solve them. And then let's look now at the last type of essay, the both sides an opinion. Okay, so let's just keep the topic the same as the last one. Computers are being used more and more in education. And now the question words discuss the advantages and disadvantages of using computers in the classroom and give your own opinion on the use of computers in schools. Okay, now how are we going to write this essay? Well, I'm going to show you 2 ways we can do this. Let's first use the structure that we just used for the 2-question essay. So if we do that, we're going to paraphrase the topic. So we'll just keep that the same. Computer technology is being used increasingly. Now let's have a look at how we respond to the question word. So we've got discuss the advantages and disadvantages of using computers in the classroom and give your own opinion on the use of computers in schools. So we can use that same sentence that we used for the previous type of essay. We can start with this essay discusses and then just paraphrase keywords from the question. Advantages becomes merits, disadvantages become drawbacks of the use of computers in schools, and my own perspective on this issue. So that's one way to complete your specific statement, by just paraphrasing the words from the task. So merits, advantages, drawbacks, disadvantages, and then this opinion here becomes my own perspective on this issue. Okay, and then the last way we can do it is to actually put our opinion into the sentence. So essentially what I'm saying, instead of saying my own perspective on this issue, we can instead say what our opinion is, which I've got here, why I believe the positives outweigh the negatives. Okay, and then this brings us to the question of which of these specific statements is better. Well, for those of you who are looking for simplicity, if you only want to have 2 structures for your introduction, if you don't have a lot of time to prepare and you just want 2 simple structures and not 3, well, this might be your better solution, because you can use the same approach that you did for the 2-question essay. So basically you'll have a structure for your opinion essay where you state your opinion, and then all other essays, the both sides an opinion and the 2-question essay, could be responded to in this way, just by paraphrasing the words from the question. Okay, so that's one choice we have. If you're going for a 6 or below, or possibly even a 7, this is good enough. Now, if you're trying to get to 8 and beyond, and you've got enough time to prepare it, I would say that this second one is the better introduction. And why is that? A lot of it's to do with the grading criteria. Let me explain just quickly, because there's a big confusion about this point about whether we need to state our opinion in the introduction of the essay. What it is, it's under the Band 7 instructions for task response. Okay, so we're looking at the task response column, and it's these words here: presents a clear position throughout the response. This is necessary to get to 7. Now, a lot of teachers and a lot of examiners even are taking this clear position to mean opinion. So they're reading this as presents a clear opinion throughout the response. And I've heard of instances where examiners penalise candidates for not stating their opinion in the introduction. Now, I personally don't think you need to do this, but I also favour a risk-free approach to your writing. And given that some examiners are incorrectly interpreting the grading criteria, it's probably a good idea to cover your bases for this type of question and present an opinion in the introduction, even though I personally think it's not required. I try to teach you an approach that most examiners are going to favour, and I call this the risk-free approach. And we can do this quite easily. Here, as you see, this essay discusses the merits and drawbacks of the use of computers in schools and why I believe the positives outweigh the negatives. Okay, so I hope you found this video useful. I will put a link to another video in the description. This other video covers all 3 parts of the essay and not just the opinion. When I get a bit more time, I'm going to make some more videos. The next videos in this series I want to make are how to write body paragraphs, in particular topic sentences, and how to support them. And then after this, I'm going to be making a video on how to write conclusions. Please subscribe to me if you would like to receive updates when I make these videos.